Back again with another review, and today we're going to talk about review Enter the Dragon. And this is for Gabbo. Alex, really good guy up here. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely a classic. And something that I have to admit here, and I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, but this was a first time watch for me, like watching the whole film in its entirety. And again, I know that sounds weird, and I've had this Blu-ray for a minute, so I don't know why I never, saw the film before. But yeah, I mean, I was aware of the film. I knew what the film was, but I never saw the film up until recently. And again, it's a classic, and it's a great movie. When it comes to Bruce Lee, I mean, the films that he did, like the other ones, I have not seen yet. One day I would like to give them a watch. But yeah, Enter the Dragon, definitely one of the greatest martial arts films that's ever made. And the plot here with this movie, Bruce Lee, his character's an instructor from Hong Kong, and he's hired by the British intelligence to investigate the suspected crime lord Han. And before leaving, Lee learns that the man responsible for his sister's death, this character O'Hara, is a bodyguard for Han. And soon, Lee is sent to fight in a tournament on Han's island, and he's joined with these two other characters. This one character, Roper, played by John Saxon. He's a gambler, and this other character, Williams, who is played by Jim Kelly. They're both, both of them are, war buddies, and they, reunite for this tournament. And while the tournament is going on this island, Lee is investigating, and he's infiltrating, Han's operation. So, while the tournament is going on, Lee, is set on taking down Han, and that's the plot here to this movie. And, one thing that really, I have to say, getting into the film itself, the characters, each character in the film had a presence. There was an aura, with this cast, especially with Bruce Lee's character, the way that he would deliver dialogue and certain lines, the way Bruce Lee does. And, I mean, jumping right into the cast, Bruce Lee was badass here in this movie. Uh, you know, I missed, and I know again I still haven't seen his other films, but you look at what could have been for Bruce Lee. Like I kept thinking throughout this movie, and I'm like, what would have been for Bruce Lee? If he had lived into the '80s, how would, and maybe I could kind of throw this question out to you guys out there watching. How do you think Bruce Lee, what he would have done in the '80s if he had lived? Among these other action stars like Arnold and Sly and Chuck Norris. Which Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris did one film, but what would have been, like if Bruce Lee had lived and he was still doing his thing throughout the '80s, and maybe he would have another chance to work with, Chuck Norris again, which I think one of the ideas for Lone Wolf McQuade, that Bruce Lee was going to be involved, or like they thought about that. Like if Bruce Lee had lived, he would have done that. I've heard that before, and I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, Lone Wolf McQuade would have had Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee reunite. Again, I don't know how much that is true, or if that's the film that I'm thinking about, but that's something that I kept thinking about throughout this movie, and I'm like, man, I wish the guy had lived and, would have flourished, throughout the, '80s and even '90s even. But, Bruce Lee is great. John Saxon, of course, everybody remembers him from A Nightmare on Elm Street. He plays the dad. And, John Saxon's good here in the movie. I mean, from what I understand, he was a black belt. Uh, like I said, he's good in the film, and I'll talk more about him a little bit. Jim Kelly plays Williams in the film, and really cool character. I would say for me, he was my second favorite character. You know, next to Bruce Lee. He had a certain look, like he carried a certain energy to the character, a certain aura. And like I said, that kind of goes with the cast here. Like their, everybody brought a presence to the film. And I think that's another thing that I don't know a lot of people talk about. I mean, of course, we could talk about the impact of the movie, its legacy, the legacy of Bruce Lee, but, the film, I mean, the supporting cast definitely helps. The bad guy Han, I forgot the actor's name here. Okay, it's right here, I believe. Shakeen. See, I can't even. I could try to pronounce, but I'm gonna fail. But Han was a memorable villain, especially when you get into the second half of the movie, and where Lee is infiltrating the operation, and Han is trying to figure out okay who it was. So you got the great scene where you got Bolo Young in the movie. He plays a fighter in the film, and the guards are sent at they're the Han, he sends his bodyguards to fight Bolo Young in the film, and he kills each one because they failed to do their job. I'm like, that's a villain, like Bolo Young. So Bolo Young, this is before Bloodsport, of course, but yeah, Bolo Young is cool to see him in there. He's not in the film too much, but it was cool to see him in there, and they got that scene where he kills the guards, great scene. And, the fight scenes, I mean, they got the scene that really, is one of my favorites where, Lee fights O'Hara. I want to say O'Hara. And he's played by Bob Wall. And I know recently Bob Wall passed away, which is unfortunate. And they kind of, it's sad because a lot of this cast has passed away. Bruce Lee, died way too young. John Saxon, I believe he died very recently. Jim Kelly died a few years ago. Bob Wall just recently. So it's sad, I mean, the film is almost 50 years old, but still, again, it's just sad. Because I like John Saxon, I like Jim Kelly. And, so, but getting back to the fight scenes, I mean, I really love the scene where Lee, has the fight with O'Hara, and he keeps getting back up after getting his ass kicked, and you get that famous, scene where, Lee finally, kills him with a stomp. I don't know what that move is, and you have that great score, ramping up. I love the score by Lalo Schifrin. If I said that right, I'm probably off on that. But I love the way that, where the scene Lee kills O'Hara and the music. Yeah, I want to go back and listen to that music now. But, the fight scenes are fine. I mean, the fight scenes work for me. I mean, today people might look at this and, will probably say, and I'm probably, I guess I'm referring to like, people's like the new generation, or if you want to say, kids today will look at this and not give it a chance, or, would laugh it off, or, but I don't care. I mean, to me, the fight scenes here, really work, and Bruce Lee was fast. I mean, Bruce Lee, I mean, I can't say enough about him. But, the fight scenes work. I mean, especially when you get to the underground, facility where he's got the nunchucks and all these people are coming at him, kicking ass left and right. And among them is Jackie Chan. Yeah, Jackie Chan, apparently, what I read too is that he had hit Jackie Chan in the face, apologized, and he actually, promised Jackie Chan, hey, you can be in every film that I do from here on out. But of course, Bruce Lee passed away, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen, possibly, we could have had Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee, do a whole movie. Imagine that. Like, if Bruce Lee had lived, and I know I keep talking about the what ifs here, but if he had waited a few years, Bruce Lee, if he had lived, he could have done something with Jackie Chan. But yeah, so you do get an early Jackie Chan appearance here in this movie. Blinking you miss, literally. But so I love the stuff where he's in this underground facility, because the main villain is producing this opium. So he has these facilities underground, and again, Bruce Lee's character's kicking ass down there. And then, like, in the third act, you get all these people fighting, and Bruce Lee goes after Han, and you have the great fight between him and Han, where you get the wall of mirrors, and you get all these different things where, Han, has this, like, claw. He picks up this claw, and he scratches. I mean, you got that famous scene right there. Like, he takes this, the main villain has this iron hand or something, that he takes off, and then he puts on, like, this claw, and he gets into a fight with Bruce Lee's character in the third act, which is really cool. And that's where you get those iconic scars in the chest and the face. If I have any nitpicks of the movie, one thing I would say is, spoiler, so I'm sorry for people out there who may have, haven't seen the film yet, but, Jim Kelly's character, I wish he had lived. I think him being killed off, kind of, I was like, I really like that character. To be honest, I'd much rather have seen Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly side by side. And again, John Saxon is a good actor. He does fine in the film. He's a good support. But there's that part of me, and I'm like, man, I wish that was Jim Kelly. Why did Jim Kelly have to die early on? You could have had Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly. Have John Saxon die. Have Han kill Saxon. I'd much rather have that, honestly, looking back. Because I felt that Jim Kelly, again, had energy to the character. I liked his, presence in the movie. So it would have been cool to see, Bruce Lee, Jim Kelly fight side by side. And again, that's not a knock on John Saxon, but I just kind of wish that it would have happened the other way around. Have Saxon be killed off earlier in the film, and have Jim Kelly, move on to the third act with Bruce Lee. So that's my, maybe a nitpick if I can mention one. I mean, the film is an hour and 40 minutes. The production value, I really love the sets here in the movie, the tournament setting, the look of the island, the underground facilities. Again, the production value is really good here. I thought it worked for the movie. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I could say here. It's a film that a lot of people have talked about, a lot of people have seen. I'm sure there's better videos out there, better reviews, better, deep dives into Enter the Dragon, because it's a classic. And again, I can see why it's one of the greatest martial arts films that's ever been made. So, and as far as the Blu-ray, I mean, there are some documentaries up here. You do have a commentary, a featurette location, and some other stuff. But yeah, so Enter the Dragon, Great movie. But that's my review of that. Thank you, Gabbo, for the request. And I will see you guys later.